Hello ladies and gentlemen and welcome to Rift TCG, the home of all things trading card games, and welcome to the first ever proper video that is going to be uploaded on this channel. This is of course a deck profile of the Ultra Athlete archetype. So what can you expect from this particular video? Well, what you can expect from this video is, of course, a list of what cards are in my deck setup. This is, of course, a deck profile after all, and not a let's stare and look at all my pretty UA cards, because why not? But I shall also be covering how to play the deck, what my build strategy is, and strengths and weaknesses that you can look at when you buy the deck, as well as a quick collecting guide, in regards to buying it online or collecting yourself in packs, whichever is most relevant for the deck. So let's start out by explaining why I've set my cards up this way, because I have set them up this way for a particular reason. So back here on my first row I have what I like to call my supplementary monster cards. They're all the monster cards in this deck that are not particularly important comparative to the Keystone cards, which you will find in this row here. Now, I only have 3 monsters here, but I also have the 4 spell cards that are probably some of the best cards. And in fact, these cards will, in every deck profile I do, not just this one, always be cards that need to go in this deck. Like 127.5% need to go in this deck. And down here we have the support cards in the third row, which is mostly, as you can see, quite empty. There's only 9 of them. So, without further ado, let's quickly move on and have a quick stroll through what cards I have in my UA deck and how many copies. So, of course, what you can see here is that I have UA Dreadnought Dunker. I have 3 copies of him. I also have 2 copies of UA Goalkeeper. I have Playmaker at 2 copies. I have Rival Rebounder at 3 copies. And UA Blockbacker at 2 copies, rounding out my supplementary monsters category. Let's go down here to support cards. I have 3 copies of UA Powered Jersey. I have 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. I have 3 copies of UA Penalty Box. And 1 copy of Mirror Force. And finally, in the Keystone card section, I have 3 copies of UA Mighty Slugger. I have 3 copies of UA Stadium, 3 copies of Terraforming, 3 copies of Reinforcements of the Army, 3 copies of UA Signing Deal, 2 copies of UA Midfielder. Now, I'll quickly interject at this point and point out that I should probably have 3 copies of this guy, for reasons I'll touch upon in a second. And finally, UA Perfect Ace running at 2 copies. Now, as you can probably tell by that lovely lot, it's not perfect, mostly because of UA Midfielder being at less than 3 copies rather, and something like MST, which I could probably substitute for Mischief of the Gnomes, say, or another level lowering card, which moves me kind of well into the problems and strengths that the UA deck has. Now, the UA deck's overarching strategy is that of special summoning and using very powerful monsters, and being one of its major support cards, and indeed one of its only equipment cards, or as far as I'm aware, its only equipment card being UA Power Jersey, which you can equip to UA monster and gains 1,000 attack and defense, and battle damage inflicting doubles, as well as being able to make a second attack during the battle phase. The trade-off is that you banish a monster at the end of the step, but to be perfectly honest, obviously with the UA effect, which is something I'll quickly explain once I finish telling you what Power Jersey does, you can just pop it back to your hand through effect. Now, every single monster card on the field here, as you can see, has what's known as the UA effect. Now, the UA effect means that by bouncing a monster that is already on your field to your hand, you can then special summon a monster from your hand, which makes one of the key cards in this deck UA Midfielder, as the only level 4 and the only monster who can be summoned, normal summoned from your hand. It makes him very, very, very crucial. That's why you should ideally run 3 copies of him. I only have 2 because it's not an ideal world. And to be honest, my deck does sometimes suffer from consistency issues as a result. That is why you need cards like UA Signing Deal and Reinforcement of the Army. I've got to be honest, Signing Deal is the worst of the two, because although you're allowed to special summon it straight to the field rather than searching and bring it to hand, that card is Reinforcement of the Army easily does that job, and you can just normal summon it anyway. If you're using either of those cards, you're probably in a jam and you don't have UA midfielder. The only problem here is you have to pay life points equal to the level times 300. So to be honest, though, you can still use UA midfielder. You only pay 1200 life points. It's not the end of the world, but it's not ideal. Rota being a card that if you could run more than 3 copies of, I probably would. But the rules say I can only use 3. Another fantastic card to run is UA Stadium. Because of the UA effect and being on a case of using powerful monsters and swapping out like they do in real sports, UA Stadium has an effect that activates not only when you normal summon, as you can see there, by allowing you to search and add a UA monster from deck to hand, but also when you special a UA monster, which of course being a UA deck, every single monster is a UA monster, why wouldn't you special summon them? Anyway, it allows you to add 500 attack points. That's a really crucial card, and that's why I run 3 copies of Terraforming, allowing me to search and add 1 field spell to hand, because that is part of the boost of the chain. Because it's all very well and good having a copy of midfielder and being able to normal, special, but it relies on you having the draw power to get through, and quite frankly what you're looking for is Mighty Slugger and Perfect Ace. Once you've got Perfect Ace or Mighty Slugger on the field with UA Stadium, you're in a good place, and you can start messing about perhaps and using some of these supplementary monsters up the top here. I'm not actually going to go into a particularly large amount of detail about them. They all do have individual effects. Painmaker, for example, allows you to swap 800 attack points from itself to another monster, which is particularly cool if you're using Mighty Slugger. But having said that, as I say, most of them are just kind of there for the ride. Probably booster fodder, I'm not particularly sure. Most likely to make up numbers, to be perfectly honest. That's often how I treat them, to be perfectly honest. These are your crucial cards. These are your crucial cards. So I'm going to talk to you quickly about Mighty Slugger. Now, the reason I love Mighty Slugger so much is because of his, quite frankly, rather beautiful effect, which allows me, when attacking, I can... my opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step, which effectively makes him your deck's beat stick, and that's really breaking down the strategy. That's what UA really, really focuses on. Apart from, beneath all that fancy swapping around, that so-called line changing, and everything, this is effectively a very big, rather beautiful beat stick deck. My favourite combination for the beat stick method is UA Powered Jersey plus Mighty Slugger, meaning that twice I can effectively hit them for 3/3 at least, so that's 6,600 attack points, whether that be to a monster or not. And with UA Stadium as well, its additional effect is, of course, that you gain 500 attack points for special summoning. So if you do that twice, Mighty Slugger is sitting pretty on 3,300 plus another 1,000. We're talking big attack numbers. This is a very, very offensive deck. Yes, it does have cards like Blockbacker and Goalkeeper, which have 2,700 and 2,800 defense points between them. But to be honest, they're really only if you're in a massive pickle. And when you get Stadium to field, you can just search deck. The weaknesses of Mirror Force, looking at Mirror Force saying it, the weaknesses of a UA deck are easily, very, very easily, its consistency issues. Now, I know that I have only got 1 copy of midfielder as opposed to 2, but nonetheless, the problem with the deck is that's still 9 from 40 chance of actually drawing the card I want to start kickstarting the chain. Obviously, with running 3 copies of Stadium, Terraforming, Rota, Signing Deal, you're trying to eliminate the problems of not having your key cards in the deck, but it's all very well and good drawing. But if you can't summon those monsters, then it's pretty much very, very useless. And that is something that often undoes me when playing this game, this deck. It's something that you can probably get around by using other searcher cards, but to be perfectly honest, these are ones that I've found to be the best. And it's not normally too bad, but there will be the odd game that you might lose just because it decided it didn't want, or your deck wasn't quite suited up to the task. Collecting wise, this was actually when I get my teeth in, jeez, this was actually a pretty. I'm just gonna give up on that one and try it again. Right, so when I got this deck, there we go, that'll do. I just went on eBay and I paid £12 for the privilege of having all of these lovely cards, and then an additional £2.49 for the sleeves. That's pretty much that. It was really easy deck to get into, and quite frankly, if you're looking at it and it was for me a fantastic entry into the meta game, or something approaching the meta game, because although it's not really considered meta and you won't find it on many lists that will list tier 1 and tier 2 decks, quite frankly, this is something that, you know, the few people that do talk about this deck, and there aren't too many in the sort of meta discussion circles, but you will find people who will be particularly happy to use a UA deck and say that, yeah, look, UAs can take on the meta game if they're played very well. It's all very, you know, what you really need to do is a quick tip of advice. And I know I haven't actually spoken about their effects, but using the effects of all of these cards up here, but in particular Perfect Ace, who is fantastic because you can discard a card and negate an effect at any point, whether it be card or just a monster effect, which is fantastic, and also reduces the chance of a dead draw, which is why I never feel bad about packing in Signing Deal, Rota, Terraforming, Stadium, because if I get one out, all of them, like, if I get these two plus Mighty Slugger or whomsoever, as long as I get these two cards in particular, Stadium and Rota or Midfielder, otherwise I'm just drawing up, but you can use them as stock. I mean, obviously you can only use the effect of Perfect Ace once per turn. It's why maybe you'd want to run 3 cards on that one, but it's not the end of the world. And obviously you can drop stuff like MST to help you get other searchers or other low level lowering cards, which would allow you to be able to normal summon Perfect Ace or Mighty Slugger if you could do so. The one I had was Mischief of the Gnomes, but to be perfectly honest, the problem with it was a trap card, so I'd have to set it. I only had 2 copies. Yada, yada, yada. That's about that for now. I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you found it really informative. I'm sorry if I kept doing things like that and not having my teeth in. And if you'd like me to try and have a look at any deck profiles, I will certainly be willing to do so if I have the decks. Admittedly, I don't have a particularly large amount of decks that I can really talk about, but you know, drop me a comment, and if you like the video and you want to see more stuff like this, then please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe, because we will be doing quite a few more, not only deck profiles but stuff like discussions and all that lovely jazz. If you have any more questions, such as something I might have forgotten to explain, or a question you had about UAs, then feel free to drop me a comment on that one as well. But until then, guys, I will see you in the next video, and thank you ever so much for watching.